Thank you for joining Monday's Substack Live. It has been, unfortunately, a very busy day, and the focus of the live today is going to be the Department of Justice settling Trump's IRS lawsuit. If you haven't heard, they are creating a $1.776 billion settlement fund in order to pay out Trump allies, probably the January 6th insurrectionists and others. Todd Blanche has created this fund called a, quote, anti-weaponization fund. Now, let's get into why I believe this is actually malpractice by Todd Blanche. And in order to explain my thinking, we have to go to the beginning, why the lawsuit was filed to begin with. As we know, Trump sued the IRS because he said that the release of his tax returns by a contractor was that the IRS should have liability, legal liability for doing so. The contractor who released Trump and others' tax returns was sentenced. He was sentenced to 5 years for the violation of doing so. But that wasn't enough for Trump. He sued not prior to becoming president, although the fact he had the entire Biden term to sue the American people, essentially. But no, he decided to sue the American people once he was in charge of the Department of Justice and the IRS. And yes, hello, the trajectory. Hi, back. Hello, everyone. So glad you are joining me. So grateful for this Substack community that we are creating here. If you're joining and you have not subscribed, free subscribe, consider upgrading if you are a free member to continue promoting this channel that I am creating. Also, feel free to share it, comment, like it, try to get the word out there. So here we go. So the Trump, as we know, filed this lawsuit back in January. Now, he then filed a motion asking for an extension for the IRS to have their counterclaim. He filed a complaint, and then in a typical situation, the defendant files a countercomplaint of why the lawsuit should not proceed. And so Trump filed an extension asking the judge to allow the IRS more time because he said they are in the middle of settling this lawsuit. Well, the judge, Kathleen Williams in Florida, federal district judge in Florida, said, well, not so fast. I may not even have a constitutional jurisdiction over this case. I may not have subject matter jurisdiction. Every case that's filed in any court has to satisfy both personal jurisdiction and subject matter jurisdiction. Personal jurisdiction is, does the court have jurisdiction over you? You, the person, you, the company. Is this in the right location? Do you do business here? Do you live here? And then also, is the subject of this lawsuit something I can oversee? Is it state law? But I'm a federal judge, so you have to transfer this to state court or vice versa. Somebody sued in the state court, but this is under a federal law, so I don't have subject matter jurisdiction. Well, she said, I don't know if I have subject matter jurisdiction because according to the Article 3 of the Constitution, I only have jurisdiction over controversies. And this doesn't appear to be a legitimate controversy because Trump seems to be suing himself. Essentially, don't waste my time. Courts are not here for you to just give money to yourself. You have to go in front of the court if there's a legitimate adverse controversy. I mean, could you imagine somebody suing themselves and then trying to get the insurance company to pay them? Right? If I'm suing myself, that's not a legitimate controversy. And of course, she used Trump's own words against him. Trump said on an airplane during a press conference, I'm essentially suing myself. She quotes him. She also quotes the executive order where Trump says that no agency has independent authority and that their interpretation of the law has to be his interpretation of the law. So she's saying, essentially, the IRS, the Department of Justice, according to this executive order, cannot have a separate definition. So if you cannot have a separate legal definition, you are essentially controlling it. You are suing yourself, which is what we have all said, right? We've been talking about this on Midas Touch, on Legal AF, and here on the Substack. Yes, good question, TF, about will we survive as a country with all the laws being broken by Trump? I will definitely get into that. And hello back from Minnesota. So here we go. So what happened today? was Trump filed a motion asking for voluntary dismissal of the case with prejudice to the judge. And at the same time, the Department of Justice issued a settlement agreement. On that, Attorney General letterhead said that they are settling the Trump versus IRS lawsuit by creating a 1.776, yes, that's not a coincidence, it's meant to be the 1776 creation of our country, $1 billion fund for the anti-weaponization fund. And Trump has said he's not going to personally benefit it. But he does not mention whether or not his sons or Trump organization will personally benefit it, despite the fact they were also plaintiffs in the lawsuit. So I think we could all assume he's planning on getting some of that money through his business and through his sons. But also, this seems to be the vehicle which he wants to pay the January 6th insurrectionists, because I guess pardoning them for their crimes apparently is not enough. And so rather than have Congress appropriate some sort of fund in which to pay off the insurrectionists, probably because he realized even for these Republican cult members, that would be a step too far and their constituents would not like it. He's instead having the DOJ create this fund as some sort of like settlement of this fake lawsuit. Now, the reason why I think this is malpractice by the Todd Blanche is he's a lawyer representing the American people, certainly representing the IRS. He has not filed one motion in the case, not one motion. Trump has filed all three. Trump filed the complaint, he filed a request for postponement, and he filed a request for dismissal. During that time, the judge said, each of you, give me a memorandum of law, whether or not this can proceed. And the deadline was May 20th. So, of course, they're settling right before that May deadline. Now, if you were in a typical, this is so obvious, I believe, malpractice, that it's almost like you don't even have to argue it. Because could you imagine if your lawyer did this to you, if you were sued personally or if a company was sued and your lawyer didn't even attempt to defend the lawsuit? We're not talking about, their strategy was bad or the legal cases they cited weren't good enough. They didn't even file anything. And not only did they not even file something, they failed to file a memo that actually could have gotten the case dismissed. So it's like double bad. One, they took no steps to try to get the case dismissed on their own. And then they had a judge inviting them to file a motion to get the case dismissed. And they didn't even do that. That is called malpractice. It is called failing to do the bare minimum of defending the American people. I know Todd Blanche is a former Trump personal criminal defendant, but in this case, he's the attorney general. He's paid for by the American people. His position is something that we have given him power. He is obligated to defend the IRS. He's obligated to defend the American people. And this is certainly not it. I believe it's a clear malpractice situation. Stunning from a legal point of view. Stunning. Yes, a bar review complaint and the attorney will lose their license. I believe Todd Blanche, once he leaves, because I think that they usually stay the complaints while they're in office, will probably and should be disbarred during this. As we know, attorneys suffered more than anybody else during Trump's first 1.0. John Eastman lost his bar license. Rudy Giuliani lost his bar license. Sidney Powell. Lawyers more than any other person suffered because the American Bar Association is truly an independent association. And we as lawyers have responsibilities and ethics that we have to follow. And we can be disciplined and we can lose our law license. Perhaps he should also be sued for malpractice by the American people and the IRS for failing to even do the bare minimum to defend it. And then let's talk about what that actually is, because folks, I just interviewed Officer Michael Fanone. As you know, the January 6th or police officer who ran to the Capitol in order to defend the Capitol. I just did an interview with him that's going to be going up on the Midas Touch Network either tonight or very soon. Because unfortunately, as we know, Trump and his cohorts are trying to rewrite what happened on January 6th, despite the fact we all watched it on TV, despite the fact that we have had testimony after testimony under oath about what happened. I mean, Officer Fanone suffered a heart attack. He was rendered unconscious for 4 minutes. He suffered severe burns and was electrocuted by tasers. He almost had his own gun used against him. And all of that was captured on his body cam video. The facts of that day are undisputable, really undisputable. And today, Trump is trying to pay those insurrectionists who beat up, and as a result, the suffering from the officers, some who died, some who suffered these physical and emotional injuries. And, I told him when I was interviewing him today that I was sorry that he had to keep repeating his story because it should have been enough the one time. But we have a Republican Party who's willing to be lied to by Trump and Fox News that's willing to repeat the propaganda of Fox News, of Trump. And we have the entire Republican Party being led by Scott Thune and Mike Johnson who are willing to try to deny the reality of that day. And we can't ever let them skirt their responsibility of forcing people who were officers who were so brave that day and suffered so much, forcing them to have to repeat their story because the lies are enough, unfortunately, for far too many Americans. So really important today. Yes, they took their lives also. I mean, really awful. And, he was saying, Officer Fanone says in his testimony that he gave way back in July of 2021, how, he suffered so that the members of Congress didn't suffer. He was beaten so those members of Congress were not beaten, because that is the fact of it. They were the line. All those officers were willing to take the brunt of it. And if they had thought, well, these members of Congress are going to just go ahead and deny the reality of what we're going through that day. Could you imagine if those members of Congress had suffered the beatings that Officer Fanone and the others suffered? Perhaps they would be more willing to actually have justice. But no, instead they took advantage of the heroic efforts of those officers and had the luxury of being safe. And instead of being grateful for that safety, they forgot it. They basically just, in the most disgraceful way, set it aside and allowed Trump to pardon so many of those January 6th insurrectionists. Those January 6th insurrectionists, they had all the constitutional privileges that are afforded a defendant in this country and were still convicted because of the evidence. It's one thing to say they were maligned, but they had the opportunity to contest any evidence against them. And yes, Mike Pence needs to speak up. I think that's an excellent point. It's time for Mike Pence to speak up again. But they were afforded all the constitutional protections. And anyway, Trump pardoned them. Anyway, he pardoned them. And then on top of the pardons, which honestly were an insult to the injuries and the bravery of those officers, he, on top of it today, finagles this way to pay them, but knowing Congress wouldn't do it or couldn't do it, despite the fact that he controls Congress. He tries to circumvent Congress and create some sort of slush fund to pay himself, January 6th insurrectionists. And I am really also questioning the timing of it right around the midterms, which we see them already trying to destroy the right to vote with Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act and all the redistricting to dilute Black power, the votes of Black Americans. We see that happening in real time. We see them seizing ballots in Georgia and Arizona and Trump threatening to send in his army places. And then at the same time, paying those insurrectionists who committed violence and the peaceful transfer of power. That is not a coincidence. That is not a coincidence. I don't believe Trump does anything selflessly. I don't think, and this is my personal opinion, right? Personal opinion protected by the First Amendment. But I do not think he is doing it to thank them for their past efforts, because Trump isn't loyal like that. At the end of the day, if somebody cannot help him now, does not serve him now, then he doesn't care about them. He just moves on. I think he's paying them now because he wants them part of his own private army to be able to call up whenever he wants to scare the rest of us with threats that he's going to call them up or whatever. He's doing it for future actions, not past loyalty, because Trump doesn't understand the word loyalty. He does not act on loyalty. It is, can you serve me or can't you serve me? So I believe that him paying them now is directly because he thinks they are useful to him now. And that is very, very scary. Joanne asking, can Blanche be disbarred? He can certainly be disbarred, usually not while they hold office. So perhaps it's going to be after he holds office, but he can certainly be disbarred, and perhaps somebody very creatively can come up with some sort of malpractice lawsuit or something. Maybe there is a action that can be brought. At the end of the day, these types of lawsuits are first impression. We've never had a president and the Department of Justice try to collude to settle a case against a president. So this is the time for nonprofit organizations to come up with new ways of reining in the government. And they can. And maybe they won't work, but we certainly have to try. I mean, Democrats, as you know, or maybe you don't know, but Democrats under Jamie Raskin, about 40 to 50 Democrats have tried to put forward a fund, a settlement fund, to help the actual January 6 officers who were injured. And part of that also is a payout to any of the officers who died that day, equal to an amount that Ashley Babbitt was killed. So they put forward that bill already, which, the next time Democrats get into power should certainly move forward. But this is where we're at, folks. It's that the Democrats' bill is called the January 6th Law Enforcement Heroes Compensation Fund. Just for us to all know, because we often say, what are the Democrats doing? What are the Democrats doing? Well, that is something that Democrats are doing, is trying to create a fund to compensate the January 6 officers. Well, we're having this real corruption, blatant malpractice, and this, who knows, like this beginning perhaps of what is his next step? What is Trump's next step? So really a difficult day for the rule of law today. Now, in terms of whether or not the settlement fund will happen or not, we also had Jamie Raskin and others file an amicus brief in that lawsuit down in Florida saying, hey, this fund needs to be approved by Congress. They basically are trying to get away with Congress's right to approve funds with this lawsuit and law fund. And so they're asking upon the judge to not allow the settlement to move forward. So whether or not Judge Kathleen Williams, what she does in this situation, she had already compiled a group of lawyers to look into whether or not a real controversy existed. But now she has the plaintiff voluntarily dismissing it. Normal situation, that would be the end of the story. Does she move forward or not? That's definitely something that I will be keeping an eye on, and I'll definitely be updating on this Substack about whether or not, at this point, it's almost like the judge is our last hope of stopping this. But also our last hope of stopping this is the vote of the American people. Because Trump is so corrupt. But it is the Republicans in Congress who truly allow this to move on. And I think somebody had asked earlier, like, can we survive this? Can we survive as a country Trump's lawlessness? The fact of the matter is, I don't know if Trump is as bad as he is, or if he is showing how bad our laws are. We had so many expectations, so many gentleman traditions that we just expected the president to act in a certain way. And Trump is revealing the inadequacies in our law. If it wasn't going to be Trump, it was going to be probably somebody else. So how we survive this is by creating strong laws. And how we create stronger laws is by electing Democrats. And so there's nothing more important than going out and voting in the midterms. I mean, really galvanizing in the midterms, making sure our friends vote, making sure our families vote, and not allowing the cynicism, the feeling of powerlessness to overtake us. Because if we do that, then they have won. We have to show up in droves to vote. And if we do, that's how we can change it. I mean, Richard Nixon, before Trump, was considered the most corrupt president. And a lot of laws were created as a result of Nixon. The act that gets cited over and over again, now I'm forgetting off the top of my head, but that has been cited in every lawsuit against Trump, was created as a direct result of Nixon. Also, the Emergency Economic and Powers Act, the one that Trump tried to use the tariffs, was created after Nixon in order to rein in Nixon's ability to tariff without congressional approval. So after Nixon, Congress created quite a bit of laws in order to rein in the power of the president. We need to do that 1,000 times. And perhaps we could say that that was the Democratic failing under Biden. They did so many really important legislative acts under Biden, but didn't do enough to make this Trump corruption illegal. Because a lot of what Trump is doing in 2.0, he did in 1.0, but to a lesser extent, of course. But even the tariffs, he did some actions that we could have already realized. We could have started to rein him in. But I think that people thought he was like a blip, that he came and then he went, and we didn't need to change our laws in order to prevent him again. We have to change our laws to prevent him again. And we have done that before. Like I said, with actually even after the Kennedy assassination, that's what, they've realized that they did not, that's when the 25th Amendment came into place, because they realized it wasn't very clear in the Constitution. What do you do if the president is incapacitated? What is the line of succession? It revealed the weakness, the gaps in the Constitution. And so they included or added the 25th Amendment to the Constitution. You could argue the same thing with FDR, right? Who ran 4 times as president, and the other party didn't like that and decided to implement a 2-term rule for presidents, because no president had ever run more than twice before, because George Washington had only run twice. And so it was a gentleman tradition to only run twice. And then FDR continued to run. And I mean, FDR created the most important laws for the middle class, Social Security, and the current framework for Medicare. But the other party didn't like that. They didn't like that he was in office for so long, and so created the constitutional amendment that limited a presidential term to 2 times. Oftentimes, I think we have not thought in advance about what the gaps are in our Constitution. It has taken a president or a situation or a series of events for us to realize how we have to protect the country from somebody or something. And so Trump is certainly showing us that we have not done enough to protect us. Like, we need a law that says that anybody running for president has to release their tax returns. So it's not just a matter of the candidate. We have to evidently now have a law that says the president can't sue their own government. We have to have a law strengthening our tariff rules again. We have to have a law even strengthening the war, how commander in chief can take us to war. But also, what is perhaps more important is what do we do with Congress? Because Congress is a check on the president. Mike Johnson, his most frequent answer is, I don't know, I haven't read it, I don't know. It's not my business. When he was asked about the, the New Deal, Daryl Thomas, the New Deal, FDR's New Deal, which really was a landmark in creation of the middle class here in America. But when Mike Johnson was asked about the sweetheart settlement deal that was kind of being discussed last week, even if it wasn't formalized, he said, well, that's not about me. That's the Department of Justice. It is about you. And the reason why the founders gave Congress the ability to declare war is they wanted this most difficult and important decision to be done by the body of Congress that was most representative to the people. The House of Representatives, as we know, gets reelected every 2 years. So they are responsive to the American people. This is why they had that power, because they didn't, want the Supreme Court that's lifetime terms, or even the president, only 4 years, to have that power. They wanted the power to be the most responsive body to the people because of the importance of that war. But the founders didn't consider what happens if that body doesn't want to use their own power. That's the really dangerous thing here, because we could talk all we want about Trump doing more than he should legally as president. But we do have a check on him. Congress is a check on him. So what do we do in a situation where the embedded check on the president doesn't want to use their power? Perhaps then we need to create more private action by the American people. Because right now it is very difficult for the American people to enforce, to sue the president about something like that. There's something called the generalized right of action. An individual cannot just sue the government under a generalized right of action just to say, I have been harmed generally by this action. That is not considered, you don't have standing for that. But perhaps we need to change that law. So if Congress is not willing to check the president, perhaps the American people cannot. Basically, even the Supreme Court that's out of control and partisan. A lot of the decisions out of the Supreme Court, including the latest on the Voting Rights Act, could be checked by Congress. But Congress is so dysfunctional, it does not do that. So really, to create that robust check on an out-of-control president, a robust check on an out-of-control Supreme Court, you've got to make Congress more powerful. And probably the way to do that is to remove the filibuster, because the filibuster is stopping their use. And I think that the approval of the American people by Congress is incredibly low, because they have not done their job for a long time, even before Trump. Congress has to become an effective body to truly become a check on the government. And if it is, that in itself reins in an out-of-control Supreme Court. That in itself reins in an out-of-control president. And it's not that difficult to get rid of the filibuster and to vote out some of those Republicans. That's why I think it's so important that the Democrats are introducing legislation that may not pass, but getting the Republicans to have to vote, kind of like the War Resolution Act, the Democrats keep putting forward. And those Republicans are on the record. And then the Democrats running against them can point that out. And then it's really up to their constituents to vote them out if you don't like it or not. That's democracy. Perhaps their constituents are just fine with spending billions of dollars and killing civilians without any congressional authorization, but get them on the record. So that way they have to run with that vote, and they can't just defer it and say, oh, yeah, I don't like it. But, maybe I wouldn't have done it. Maybe I would stop it. You have them on the record to vote. This is how you have accountability and transparency. Yes, abolish the filibuster. Absolutely. We need to abolish the filibuster. So great. Thank you so much for joining me today. It was a busy day. Like I said, I interviewed Officer Fanone. Be sure to check that out when it goes on the Midas Touch channel. Also, we did the Legal AF live today. I don't know if any of you if you're not watching, why not? Basically, Lisa Graves and I are hosting the new Monday night version of Legal AF. As you all know, I'm sure Legal AF is the beloved podcast that was started by Ben and Michael Popak on the early days of the Midas Touch channel. Then so they go on Saturday. Then there was a new Wednesday edition with Karen Friedman Agnifilo. And now we have a Monday night version with Lisa Graves and I, and it's being brought to the Legal AF channel, which seems so perfect, of course, because the Legal AF podcast now has a home on Monday night on the Legal AF channel. And we are doing it live, so we get to hear in real time what you all are thinking. And if you have any specific questions, we've had our third episode today, and it was such a joy working with Lisa Graves. We are loving it, despite the fact that there's some awful news, but we all need to stay informed. We have to not just trudge the path, we have to carve the path. And we do that by being informed, because that's the other thing too that was filed today was, if you know, the Pentagon, New York Times lawsuit, that new press policy that came out in October that was changing the press policy where the New York Times and other organizations couldn't report on anonymous sources, which, come on. I mean, at that point, then you're just a propaganda piece. The New York Times sued, saying this was a violation of their constitutional rights, and a judge agreed with them. Of course, rather than listening to the judge, the Pentagon revised the interim policy by basically abolishing what was called the correspondence corridor and saying that the press now that was going to be kept off-site could only come in with an escort, basically like as if you're on some sort of Capitol tour. So restricting who the press can talk to. And so the New York Times just sued again today under this interim policy, saying obviously this is still a unconstitutional policy. And I had spoken with the lead lawyer on that, Ted Boutros. He's with the firm Gibson, Dunn & Crutcher. That's my old law firm. I have to say I am so proud of the fact that Gibson, Dunn & Crutcher was not one of the law firms who bent the knee to Trump. They're a very big law firm, but they were not one of the ones that bent the knee. And this is exactly why those of us, we all called out foul for the law firms that did bend the knee. Because look this is who you have defending free press. And that's why Trump went after the law firms. And Ted Boutros, I have a clip of his interview that's in the Legal AF Live, so you can listen to that. It's been posted because we already recorded it. You can go ahead and watch that. But he, is such a free speech advocate. He also was the one who successfully defended NPR and PBS against Trump trying to defund them. He just won that lawsuit about a month ago. He also, of course, is representing New York Times in this. In Trump's first term, he's the one that represented Jim Acosta, if you remember when they tried to cancel his press pass. And then also he defended Mary Trump when they tried to stop the publication of her book. So Ted Boutros, a former colleague, really on the front lines with free press and free speech. I can think of nobody else better suited to represent the New York Times. So they're going to head. They already beat the Pentagon once. Now they're trying to beat them again here. But just for a moment before I sign off, let's just take a moment here and see how stunning that all is. Because here we are, Trump first term, just taking away one reporter's press pass, and we were all horrified, rightly, by it. And now them trying to change the press pass essentially of all of the outlets. Even the judge saying that they really just wanted to keep like their favorable journalists. And here, the New York Times, of course, no stranger to iconic free press decisions, because it was the Pentagon decision. As you know, the New York Times during the Vietnam War printed the Pentagon Papers and national security pages worth of inside information about how the government was basically lying to the American people about what was going on in Vietnam. And the Pentagon tried to stop the printing of those papers, and the Supreme Court said, no, this is freedom of the press. You are arguing national security to shut this down, but this is not some sort of catastrophic national security issue to stop the publication of those Pentagon papers. So you had literally the printing of top secret papers that the Pentagon was stopping. And now they are trying to stop just the printing of information from anonymous sources. Like, we have gotten, like, they are taking us down a really far tunnel that we do not want to go down. To go from don't print top secret papers to don't print anonymous sources. The restriction, I mean, we're talking about North Korea, really. I mean, I'm not even like exaggerating. We are talking about North Korea level of restriction to say that you cannot print on anonymous sources. Because otherwise, you are literally just printing what the government wants you to hear. And at that point, what's the point of the press? I mean, I was a journalism major before I went to the law school, so I'm a big advocate of this. And obviously, I know so many of you are here too, but you don't need a press if you're just going to print what the government wants you to say. So that's why that attack of the Pentagon is by anonymous sources is so, like, shocking and so deeply important. And so the New York Times, again, as we said, one on the first one on the second. This should not go up to the Supreme Court. Should be a very easy decision. The law and the facts clearly show this is unconstitutional. But we never know. Trump will certainly try to sue or bring it to the Supreme Court if he loses again, which he probably will lose. And then the question is, does the Supreme Court take it or not? And, but again, if Congress were a valid check on this, they could do something about the Pentagon. They fund the Pentagon. Perhaps they could write in some of their funding something about funding the correspondence corridor or something like that. We can't just rely on the Supreme Court to save us, because the Supreme Court will not save us. But Congress has a lot they could do to protect us, and it doesn't, because it is so dysfunctional. So we have to, call out the Supreme Court when they are bad, but we cannot put all of our attention on the Supreme Court, because then we are giving Congress a pass as if they are powerless. They are not powerless. They are more responsive to us because we can get them out of office. Personally, okay, I'm going to end on one more note. I don't know if you all saw Mike Johnson talk about how they shouldn't ban stock trading. It's the most disturbing quote ever. He said that, they only make like $170,000 a year, and they work like 175 days or something like that, and they're not going to be able to take care of their families. So offensive on so many levels, of course, because they literally pass laws and are unwilling to increase the minimum wage. So many Americans make do with so much less, and frankly have a lot less vacation days. I mean, a whole heck of a lot vacation days. So Mike Johnson really just being offensive to the hardworking American people to act as if we need to be able to inside trade because we're not making enough money. Because they could. We're not talking about them putting it into a blind trust, right, or a fund. We're not saying that they cannot own stock at all. We're saying you can't buy and trade based on information because, one, it's cheating. If we don't get to cheat, you don't get to cheat. And two, because we want to know that the decisions and laws you are making are for the benefit of us and not your pocket. These are basics. This is like 101. My dad is an economist, and it's like I started my legal training as a securities and exchange lawyer that helped filings for corporations. This is basic. The most basic thing is to not inside trade. And somehow Mike Johnson wants to justify this because they're not making enough. I mean, this is where we're at, people. But you know what? Here's the thing. If some people don't want to do this, maybe they should just leave, because I would argue we should not have career politicians, period. Maybe people should only serve and be public servants for a period of time. You know what? If you want to make more money and you think your background would entitle you to more money in the private sector, great. And if you also want to be a public servant, great. Just do it for a few years, then go back into private practice. Why do you have to be a career politician? Why do you have to go in politics for your entire life? Wouldn't it be nice if we had people actually cycle through Maybe we had new ideas, new strategies. Maybe people wouldn't be so focused on keeping their job than doing their job. I'm sick and tired of, honestly, even Democrats. I have heard somebody, like not willing to do the right thing because they're so worried that doing the right thing will get them elected out of office. And it's okay. Like, what's the point of your job if you're always worried about keeping your job? You're not serving the American people at that point. You're serving your own ego. And, I can see like, okay, it must be hard to have worked, campaigned and put all that funding in and then maybe get somebody else get out of office in 2 years. I'm not saying that's not easy, but that is your point. Is your point only to like just be quiet and not do anything bold for years and years and years and years? This is why we have a dysfunctional government. So I say to Mike Johnson and all those Republicans, if you don't think you're getting rich enough, leave. Do your 2 or 3 years or your Senate 6-year term and leave. Be a public servant and give us your time and talent and then leave. Let somebody else do the job. What kind of egomaniac thinks that they're the only ones that can do that job? We are full of talented people in this country. And if you don't think you're going to make enough, don't do it the rest of your life. Do it for a short time. And so that's why also let's just give our props to Representative Thomas Massie, who has done the right thing. And he may lose his job for it because they are pouring more money into his race. AIPAC and Miriam Adelson and others are pouring millions into his race because of what he has said about the Epstein files and for what he has said against the Iran war and going to war in general and what he has said about Netanyahu and Israel. They're trying to get him out of office. And unfortunately, he may be an example of doing your job may cost you your job. And of course, we don't want people who are morally and ethically responsible to lose their job. But I'm so glad, and I'm sure he is so glad, that he did the right thing, even if it cost him his job. But we're definitely going to keep a race out for that. At the end of the day, money may buy votes, but people vote. Money buys ads, disinformation campaigns, but voters vote. I don't know how many of you, if any of you are in his district, but my gosh, if you are, I would vote for the person who did the right thing. So brave, willing to lose his seat. And if every Congress member were willing to vote to do the right thing, they actually couldn't pour enough money into the races. That's the sad part about it. If more Republicans had joined Thomas Massie, they would not have enough money to get them all out of office. If you're willing to do the right thing, I believe then that is when you are a true public servant. Hopefully, he will not get voted out of office. But if he does, I think he will always be remembered for doing the right thing and hopefully have a career afterwards and perhaps even go back into public office once Trump is done. But I think the American people and the Epstein survivors will always remember him for doing the right thing. Thank you, everybody, for joining me on this live. If you haven't subscribed to me, please be sure to do that. Consider upgrading to a paid membership so I can continue to grow this channel. And as Ben Mysalis had said when they first started Midas Touch, he said, send this to 5 people so they can know and grow. Send this to even 2 of your friends who maybe has not joined my channel so we can continue to grow. I will continue to do the Substacks. I continue to write articles in collaboration with Midas and do Substack collaborations on this channel with other people. I did with Adam Muckler and Waj and just Don Lemon. It's just such important conversations we're having. Let's do them together. Thank you, everyone, for joining and have a great rest of your night.